Welcome back. So we'll give it just another few moments. We'll go ahead and get started. Probably not going to be surprised by this, but today is a full agenda. I am going to do my best because, as you know, you did not receive an evaluation at part one. You did not receive an evaluation at part two. Although many of you maybe expected it, you will receive a brief evaluation at the conclusion of part three today. And I'm going to do my best to build in a little bit of time at the end to make sure that you are able to finish it and then go on to your next appointment. I'm going to do my best to make sure that that happens. I can't guarantee it, but I'll do my best. All right, we are at 94 people. I'm going to go ahead and officially get started. Two different emails that I registered. I don't think so, Kelly. I don't think that'll be a problem, just as long as you've typed your name in all three parts. So thank you for putting that in the chat. We're going to go ahead and get started. You may recall that I asked you to be thinking about something in preparation for today. And I'm going to let you ponder on that a little bit longer while we take care of some logistics. But then after we take care of the logistics, we're going to come back to the thing that I actually asked you to ponder and be prepared to discuss for our conversation, to start our conversation today. So I'm just planting that seed again and inviting you to think back on that. And if you're thinking like, I can't remember what that was, maybe it'll come to you as we're covering the logistics. And if it doesn't, don't worry. Hopefully it's come to at least one of the 103 of us that are here today. And surprisingly enough, I even remember what it was I asked you to think about. So I am going to start, though, with a true or false question. And I'm going to ask everybody to please type either a T or an F. I'm removing the opportunity for unsure. Okay. So true or false? If you weren't able to complete the full 6 hours of this course, you can get partial credit for the time that you attended. Is that true or false? It is so false. I'm sorry to say, folks, and I need to say it again. And I hate it that it's structured this way. Yeah, it happened. I'm sorry it happened to you. The fact of it is that we can only grant 6 hours credit total, and you can only claim 6 hours of credit if you were here for 6 hours. So I just again need to underline that for anybody who's with us today. You are more than welcome to stay. If for some reason, I know a colleague emailed me earlier this morning, they missed part two, but they were coming to today. And again, you're more than welcome to stay. But sadly, we cannot grant partial credit. So only folks that have attended the full 6 hours will get full 6 hours of credit. Okay, I'm sorry about that. But that is unfortunately the structure. Okay, good, Lorianne. That's great. And Lorianne, as long as you've typed your name into the chat the 3 times, that will, that's our record that you have been here, which is great. Whether it's from your phone or whether it's from your computer, it doesn't really matter. So I will repeat, if you have not yet typed your full name into the chat, please make sure that you do that, because I want to make sure if you've been here for the 6 hours that you get your 6 hours of credit. Because honestly, folks, I know that for many of you, the recredentialing credit is extremely important. And I want to respect that and make sure that you get that. All right. So we're all on the same page in regard to that. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will just review a couple of our guidelines. I find it hard to believe, but today is January 29th. Amazing. We've been on this journey from January 12th to now. And it's funny that I put it that way, because it has been a journey. And what I want to say to you, and you may agree or disagree with this, and please put it in the chat. You can type A if you agree and D if you disagree. I want to throw out for your consideration that since we quote unquote began this journey as a learning community, all 107 of us together on January 12th, the time that has occurred between the 12th and the 22nd and the 22nd and today has been equally as valuable to your journey with the practice of motivational interviewing as our time together in this learning community. Whether if you agree with that, type an A. If you disagree with it, type a D. If you're unsure, you can type a U. I'd like to say that I strongly would be typing a capital A in the chat in regard to that, because since the 12th, since our time together, I've been thinking about all of us, and I've been thinking about what we talked about and what we reflected on and what your reactions were and what your questions and your comments and your insights were. So I find that that time in between is extremely valuable to my journey with the practice of motivational interviewing, and the fact that I'm able to continue my journey as someone who practices motivational interviewing and trains on motivational interviewing within the frame of our learning community of 109 people. So 40 of you responded, and it looks like most of you agreed with that statement. So what I'd also just like to remind you of that we are a learning community, and this is meant to be important and relevant and of use to you. So if there are things that come up, if there are things that we talk about in regard to the practice of motivational interviewing that maybe don't reflect the official views of our funder, that's perfectly okay, because this is our learning community. As we continue our conversation in our community of 110 people at this moment together, a reminder that we want to be intentional about our language, that words actually do have power, and that's very relevant and applicable, if I'm saying that right, to the practice of motivational interviewing. And we as a learning community, 111 of us now, want to be using language that welcomes everybody, respects everybody, and includes everybody in our learning community conversation. Again, as you know, and a couple of you have already sent me private messages, thank you. I appreciate your communicating with me about that. Please turn on your camera. Please be on camera for the entire 2 hours. If you need to step away, again, for a few moments, not for 45 minutes, please just send me a private message letting me know you're stepping away, and then just rejoin us. Turn your camera back on when you come back. You know, and I know this is the third time I'm repeating it, but you know that you are free to unmute and interrupt me at any time. If there's something you want to add, a comment you want to share, information, a reaction, I welcome that and I really encourage it. And the other thing that I would say is, as a reminder, if somebody else has the floor, if Rose has the floor, for instance, and Rose is making her point, please don't interrupt her. Wait till she finishes her point if there's something that you'd like to add. Also, this is our learning community conversation. This is your individual as well as our collective journey with the practice of motivational interviewing. The goal is not for us all to be on the same page. The goal is for us to be able to listen to each other and offer respect to each other within the frame of our learning community. The last of those particular guidelines is also to speak from the I. I had this experience. I believe this. I know this information. I have this reaction. So before we get to this big eyeball that you just saw, I'm going to thank you, Samantha. Thanks for letting me know. Good morning, Rose. Thank you so much. Glad you're here again. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm just simply going to ask, can everybody agree again for the third time to those guidelines? This is your last time to throw money or give a thumbs up or whatever you want to do to communicate your agreement. Thank you. Very good, very good. Very good, Emily. Thank you so much. All right. Or an electronic thumbs up, Victoria. Excellent. Very good. I agree, Shannon says, all in caps. Excellent, Roxanne. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. Excellent. Thank you, Stacy. I asked you to think about, oh, let's see. Somebody has just put something very lengthy in the chat. So I want to take a moment to quickly check it. And I know you all are probably reading it as well, but let's see what our colleague put in the chat. Michelle writes from last session, the story. Oh, Michelle, fantastic. You've made an excellent transition. Story was mother and 6-year-old daughter watching comedy. And I love that you put in the chat to help out all those people who maybe didn't remember it. The story was mother and 6-year-old daughter watching comedy program on regarding quitting smoking, etc. Neither said a word. This is almost word for word. Fantastic. Mother's hand stating, "Mommy, I don't want you to die." Prior to smoking 2 packs, cut down 15 cigarettes. This is fantastic. It's almost like AI regeneration. Also, in our group, we discussed Mother's Change Talk and left with the question, practicing MI, what do you think happened next? Sarah says, I don't want to experiment with that with 100 people on my Mac. Well, I understand that, Sarah. That's fine. But if you want to experiment with what you think happened next in the conversation with the mother, and remember, folks, I was practicing motivational interviewing with this woman. So what do you think happened next? And you're more than welcome to unmute. Now that I just splashed water all over my computer, you're more than welcome to unmute. What do you think happened next? Okay, wonderful. That's great, Jan. And I see that some people are putting things in the chat. That's great. Yeah, go ahead. I hear someone unmuting. Go ahead.
I'm thinking that the mom broke down. I'm thinking the mom broke down in tears.
Okay. And Mark, if that was indeed the case, is it okay if I ask you a follow-up question?
Okay.
So if indeed that was the case, and some of our colleagues in the learning community are typing things in the chat, what I'm asking you is, what do you think I did next? By the way, Mark, I just want to let you know, some people have suggested that what I did next is I broke down into tears. But I'm asking you, what do you think I did next?
Maybe ask her, so what do you think about this?
Okay. So you're suggesting, like a couple of people in the chat, you're suggesting that maybe I asked an open-ended question. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What other people think? And again, you can follow Mark's lead and you can unmute. And I like the fact, Mark, by the way, thank you for demonstrating kind of what you might say to her next. Okay. Like you almost said it as if I was her. So what do you think about that? Anybody else want to unmute? Whether you're on a Mac or a PC, it doesn't matter. Does anybody want to take the risk to unmute and say what? Yep, Robert just put in the chat, sounds like this was powerful to you. Okay. Yep. And I want to reread what Robert wrote. Sounds like this was powerful to you. Diana nodded her head when I said that again. She noted that, am I reading it again? Offered support. And Melissa, if I offered support, how did I do it? What did I say or what did I do? Go ahead, Hillary. Go ahead. Hillary's applauding and raising her hand at the same time. Go ahead.
I was trying to raise my hand and I tried your thing, but it didn't work.
Didn't work.
My computer is not that cool.
Are you on a Mac or a PC?
I'm on a PC.
Okay, go ahead. Me too. Go ahead.
So I guess what I would be thinking that I would be doing is reflecting back or summarizing what she was saying. And my goal is to create partnership and acceptance and compassion at that point. I'm not getting into what you're doing next or anything like that, but my goal is to create relationship.
Understood. And Roxanne agrees with you. She was nodding her head. I saw that, Roxanne. You agree, yes? Yeah. So Hillary, what I want to draw a distinction between what you said and what Mark said. Because you did offer the disclaimer, like, I'm not saying anything about what I actually would do or say next. I'm talking about what my intention is. And I agree with you and Roxanne that that is indeed the intention that you would want to create. But what I'm asking you, if you're open to a follow-up question, what I'm asking you along the lines of what Mark did and demonstrated, and remember, there's no one right way, but along the lines of that, what would you say or do next if I was the woman and we were in the conversation right now? We know what your intention is. You described it beautifully. But remember, folks, the practice of MI is not a description of your intention. And don't misunderstand me, Hillary. I appreciate that you described your intention. That's great. You got to know why you're doing what you're doing, but then you got to do it.
So
To quote a movie.
I guess what I would say would be like, so how did you
Just say it to me. Yeah.
how did you feel when your daughter said that to you? What uh I would just leave it open in that way.
Understood. And that is exactly along the same lines as what Mark suggested, which was an open-ended question. Okay? Okay? Fantastic. And Hillary, thank you. Thank you for describing your intention. And then thanks for taking it into what you would say or do next. Thank you. Is there anyone else, or Julie writes, or how your daughter's reaction made you feel? Very similar to what Hillary is saying. Is there anybody else that would be willing to unmute and say what they would say or do next with this particular client in this particular situation?
Would it be
Go ahead, Emma.
okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Emma.
Would it be okay if like you just took that moment to reflect with her and say, like, I think that's beautifully brave of you? Like just acknowledging her intention, just being like, that's brave for you to want to reduce for her, like, because it's out of her box. Or would you keep exploring like her her mindset at the moment to try to create more change?
Okay. So let me underline two things, Emma. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could stay unmuted, because I'd like to ask you a follow-up question, if that's all right.
Yep.
Okay, and you let me know. But what Emma is contemplating is, would she use an affirmation? Okay, because let's label the skills. Okay, Mark suggested an open-ended question. Hillary suggested an open-ended question. A number of people suggested open-ended questions. Emma is suggesting possibly an affirmation, which is a kind of reflection. Okay, or evoking more change talk by exploring the change more. Probably, and Emma, tell me if I'm accurate, but probably through the use of an open-ended question.
Okay.
So Emma's suggesting two possibilities. Okay. And remember, folks, there's no one right way to do motivational interviewing. So, Emma, here's my follow-up question. If you were in the same position as Mark and Hillary were, and I were the woman, and we were having this conversation right now, what would you say to me? Or what do you think would happen next?
Wait, I'm the woman or you're the woman?
I'm the woman.
You're the woman. Okay. So we already asked her how she felt when her daughter said that.
No, we haven't done anything yet.
Oh,
What we've done is we're entertaining what could be done. And what I'm asking you to do, because you were doing something a little different than Hillary. You're kind of contemplating, should I use this response or should I use this response? And what I'm asking you to consider is, if I'm the woman and we're talking right now and there's a dog in the room. No, kidding. It's okay. I love dogs. If we're talking right now, what do you think you would do or say? And I'm just asking you to trust your gut, Emma, on what, and you just muted yourself, by the way.
yeah,
I understand. It's okay. Dogs bark. It's okay.
okay. Yeah, no, I'm not good with the open-ended question part. And so, But like, I like that. How did you feel when you said this? Because when I was a chiropractor, I don't have the therapy background. So like, what I'm noticing is I moved way faster through the process. So like, I was shifting really quick into what can we do to get you.
Yep. You wanted to rush to planning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Understood. And remember, folks, we're practicing motivational interviewing. And the other thing that I want to underline in terms of what you said, Emma, is that you're still kind of describing what you think you do next. So if we were in the moment,
Right. Yeah.
because
So I would say,
Hillary loves this, by the way. Go ahead. And you can just look at me and say it.
yeah. So how did you feel when how did you feel when she said it?
Fantastic. Again, another open-ended question. And Emma, thank you for making that transition. We're going to go to Mark and we're going to go to Layla, but thank you for making that transition, because remember, folks, MI is a practice. And I want to respond specifically to something that Emma said. And Emma, I love the fact that you shared that you were a nutritionist. No, a physical therapist. Chiropractor. Well, chiropractor. And I love that you said, I don't have the therapy background. And I love that you said that, because the thing I want to underline again, and I cannot stress this enough, you don't need the therapy background to practice motivational interviewing. It's not a requirement. So I really appreciate that you said that. Mark, we're going to go to you, and then we're going to go to Layla.
Yeah, I was also thinking that maybe I would ask her.
Just ask me. Just ask me.
Okay. So what would happen with your daughter if anything was to happen to you?
Wow. Okay. So that would be an open-ended question. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Layla, what's your thought? What's your reaction?
So from what you're telling me, it sounds like it was really intense what your daughter said to you. And it made you think a lot about taking steps. So can you describe what you felt and what kind of steps you would feel comfortable taking? And then I would kind of leave it there and let her speak.
Fantastic. So Layla, you have just done 3 things. Okay. And I want to put practice labels on all 3 things that Layla just suggested. And again, the thing I want to thank all of you for is we are practicing right now. And let me underline, folks, we are practicing motivational interviewing because there's an identified behavioral change goal. Layla just suggested 3 things. Thing 1, she summarized. Thing 2, she asked a closed question. Thing 3, she followed it with a planning related open-ended question. She did all 3 of those things in that one moment. Now, Layla, you provide me with a wonderful opportunity to say to the group, do you want to know what I did? And you could say, no, we don't really care. Or, yeah, we want to know. Do you want to know what I did? Okay, Lori wants to. If Lori wants to know, I'm telling everybody. Lori, thank you. So we know what the woman said to me. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'll say it now. This conversation was actually recorded. It was being recorded. Did I mention that before? No. Yeah, it was being recorded. So I know exactly what I did because it was recorded. So she said what she said. And the first thing that I did was nothing. I was present and quiet. Let me repeat that. The first thing I did was I was present and quiet. And you can actually hear it, oddly enough, on the tape. Now, I'm very curious before I tell you the second thing I did. And Layla, if it's okay, can I start with you? Could I ask you this question? And then we'll see if anybody else wants to respond. But I'm curious because you suggested three things and they all make sense. My question to you is why do you think that my choice, and I'm asking everybody this, but Layla's going to start us off, but my choice was that I was present and absolutely quiet. Why do you think that was the choice I made?
Because sometimes she finished sharing something that seemed to be very intense. And sometimes you need to let someone kind of process it or kind of sit in that space for a little while to it kind of like really sink in of what she's saying, because maybe at that moment where she made the realization because she verbalized it. So when you verbalize it, sometimes you got to wait and kind of let the person hear what they just said and kind of sit in it for a little while.
Yes. Yes. And Layla, please confirm to everybody that I did not speak to you in between part one and
No.
two and three, or three, 2 and 3, nor did I pay you to say what you just said.
No.
Not yet. So Layla is absolutely right. And I have to tell you something, folks. And we're going to go to Will and we're going to go to Mark as well. But I also want to underline something, Layla, because I need to be transparent. I need to own this to you because of your insight into what I said and to everybody else. I did not consciously think I'm going to be present and silent here. It was what my gut instinct was based on what Layla just described. And Layla, I want to underline something that you said, which is that the intensity of what she said was so much in the room and in the moment that I had to give it the space to let it do its work. I could have interrupted it, and I chose not to because she said it, and as Layla said, she needed to sit with it for a moment. That was what my gut told me. Okay, Layla, thank you so much for starting us off in regard to that. Will, any comment, reaction, and then we're going to go to Mark.
Yeah, two things. One, that's a great example of silence as a technique skill to convey that you're listening. It's when I do the course of the training, active listening is part of the skills, and there are different things you can summarize, you can rephrase, you can all that kind of stuff, and silence is one of them. And so that's a good example of the power of silence. And I would go one step, and I think that's what you meant as well, is that not only does she need to sit with it, I needed to sit with it.
Yep. Yep. Thank you for adding that, Will. And again, I can certainly identify with that in the sense that I needed to sit with it too, so I could understand the depth of the intensity before I said anything. Yeah. Yeah. Mark, floor's yours.
I think it's sometimes with this, it's easier to ask a client a question. It's easier for them, right? So then they can just answer the question, right? Opposed to sitting with the feeling and them starting off with saying what they're feeling and how they want to go forward. right? So a little bit of evoking to deal with the ambivalence if it's there, and listening for change talk.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Uh, Julie just wrote in the chat, I said previously observe is including listening, and after, according to that space, we can decide how to interact. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of an opportunity to get a sense of the lay of the land. So let me then tell you, and I'm fascinated to hear your reaction to this, but let me tell you what I said next. And Nadia, I'm going to look at your comment in just a moment. I'm going to share this, invite people's reactions, and then we're going to come back to what Nadia put in the chat, because it's a very reoccurring question, Nadia, and I want to make sure that I spend a moment, and we as a group spend a moment looking at it. So I was present and I was silent. And now I'm going to tell you what I said. And Hillary, if it's okay, can I say it to you? Can I just look at you as I say it, just so that I have somebody that I'm looking at?
Sure.
Thank you so much. So the client said what they said. The moment had its space and its time. And then my gut instinct prompted me to say the following. Remember, folks, we're practicing motivational interviewing. We're not conducting a therapy session at this moment. The identified behavioral change goal is moving from 40 cigarettes a day to 15. The client has just offered that change talk that Mark is inviting us and reminding us to listen for. We've provided a space for her to react to her own change talk. And then I said the following. Your daughter doesn't want you to die. Period. End of sentence. So my question to you all is, what tool am I using and why? Hillary, thanks for letting me say that to you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It would make me cry. That's what would happen.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, and we may come back to that. So what tool did I use and why did I use it? Yep. Some people are writing summary, some are writing restating. It's actually Shannon just wrote, Shannon, it's a reflection. And by the way, to keep in mind, folks, and it's a reflection because it's one thing. And to be technical about it, it's a simple reflection, because there are different types of reflections. So it's a simple reflection. But to Hillary's point, you'll notice that I offered the reflection, and Layla, I'm thinking of you as I say this, I offered the reflection with the same intensity that she shared the content with me. So I want to underline, folks, MI is also about how you say something in the moment. It's not just what you say. And you'll also notice I didn't say, so what you're telling me is that your daughter doesn't want you to die. That's a different communication than what I offered Hillary. Those are two different communications. One of them is going to help increase the person's motivation to make that change. The other one is going to feel more like an observation. So my question to you folks, and anybody who wants to unmute and comment on this, my question to you is what do you think is my rationale behind offering that reflection? And you're more than welcome to unmute. Yeah, and Michelle wrote straight to the point. Go ahead, Hillary.
That's her motivation. So you're pointing directly at her own motivation for her change.
Yep, yep. And some people are typing in the chat to reflect on her, to restate her motivation. Yes, it's her motivation. I am employing the thing that's motivating her most, and I'm offering it in a simple reflection. And I will also note to you folks, at this moment, I did not move to planning because we're still strengthening her motivation. That's how MI works, folks. That's why it's not helpful to run right to planning, because the person needs to be motivated by their motivation. Excellent. Fantastic what people are putting in the chat. Now, Nadia, I don't know if you're able to unmute, but if you are able to unmute, can you restate what you put in the chat? Because it actually got buried about 30 chat messages ago. So can you, unfortunately, no. Okay, could you copy it and retype it into the chat or give me a summary of it? It was about silence. Yeah, so unfortunately, Nadia is not able to unmute. So I'm going to try and scroll up and see if I can find it. And if not, you could type it back in. Yeah. Nadia wrote, how do you deal with someone that is fearful of silence and comes off with repetitive statements? Yeah. Yeah. And I think I understand what you mean by that. And let me see if I can offer a response that's helpful. Yes. Ivelisa, that's very true. It does show that the daughter statement shows that she sees and understands her mom smoking. Yes. Okay. So I don't know about you. I know for myself, I had to develop a certain amount, and I'm going to use this word very intentionally. I had to develop a certain amount of tolerance and comfort with allowing silence. And that was an I statement, by the way. And having the conversation that I had with this woman, in addition to other conversations, has helped me. Okay, I'm not alone. Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa. I'm not alone. Okay, and Kim as well. So I want to underline that because I had to learn that the silence could actually help to support and strengthen the motivation, as opposed to me acting out my discomfort by needing to ask a question. Like you were saying, Mark, it's easier to ask a question. So I had to learn how to tolerate and also accept that there was benefit possibly in that silence. And in terms of repetitive statements, I think the thing that we really want to be careful of, folks, is that when we're using open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, or summaries, when we're practicing motivational interviewing, we are doing it with intention. We're not doing it simply because the client said something, and now I'm going to repeat what the client said. Okay? We're doing it when practicing motivational interviewing with the intention of strengthening their change talk or evoking more change talk and helping them to move toward planning. Okay, so there's an intention behind it that can kind of move us away from the experience of like, what is the word? Paraphrasing. Just paraphrasing because the client said something and now we're paraphrasing it. We're trying to understand and employ this person's motivation. Okay? So, or evoke more change talk. And that's usually through the use of an open-ended question or a reflection of the change talk. Okay? So just keeping that in mind. So I'm going to just quickly check the chat because I know people were making some statements. Sarah wrote, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm glad. I'm a grad student in mental health counseling, and I'm in my first internship this semester. Last week, my first week is one of our sessions, and adolescent shut down 100%, and the counselor just sat in silence. So I did too. It was incredibly uncomfortable for a bit. After what felt like forever, I was able to get more comfortable with it, but it sticks with me. Yeah. Understood. Yes, I'm in an MSW program. Yay, MSW. And I'm an MSW as well. And the silence is so hard and uncomfy, but can be so meaningful. Yeah. And folks, I appreciate you noting that, because I want to underline something too. And this is, I think, a misconception about the practice of motivational interviewing. It's also a misconception about client-centered counseling, honestly. And that is this, that like the conversation, everybody's supposed to feel comfy and warm in the conversation, and it's about being nice, and that is not how people change. And of course, we're not confronting the person. Of course, we're not being disrespectful. Of course, we're not being directive. We're not telling the person what to do. That would all be MI inconsistent. That would also be client-centered inconsistent too. The thing I want to underline, in Layla, I'm also thinking of you as I say this, the thing I want to underline is that we don't want to, because of our own discomfort, take away somebody else's discomfort, which is actually going to move them toward change. And what I can tell you, folks, is that this mother felt really uncomfortable that she was making her daughter afraid that she was going to die. My intention was not to help her to feel okay about that. My intention was not to make her feel bad about it either, but it was not to make her feel okay about it. And I'm not talking about somebody who's in acute distress. I'm talking about somebody who's considering change and the realities of that change. So don't get in the way of or interrupt that person doing their work. And don't be afraid to employ their motivation. Your daughter doesn't want you to die. That's probably pretty hard to hear. And it's the truth. And it's her truth. So just keeping that in mind, folks. Yes. And yes, Kim, patience is often a part of it. Patience is a part of it, and holding ourselves back from rushing to planning. And we're pressured to want to plan all the time. Elizabeth, the floor is yours. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good day, wherever you may be.
I'm in New York. Good morning.
Okay, good morning.
Paul and everyone. It's touching me to hear the conversation because I was there before. As a smoker that I'm cutting down, I heard that from my daughters. It's kind of like tearful, like, Ma, if you don't stop, you can die. And hearing that, and also hearing that from the doctors, because a whole lot that goes on with a person's health. And when it's like, when they're trying to say, you know what, this is not good for you, this is harming your body, along with your other health condition. So, to hear it is like it's hitting back home. Because those was the same words that my daughters still, say, Ma, if you don't stop, you're gonna die. And then what about us? You have grands, like, so I'm feeling it. I don't know if this is a made up thing, but just by me hearing it, is getting real emotional to the point that I've been hearing this for a while. So yeah, so it's really deep to know that you got people that cares. But then also is the silence. Because when they say that, you just sit there like, and you just giving them a look, but then internally you looking back like, yeah, I know. I went to the Saints, the smoking class. I hear all the bad, things in the cigarette, this, that, and the third. So it's like it kind of like internally knowing that because but when it just come back, like, if these things are wrong, why are you doing it? We don't want you to die. So it makes you get into that silence and to feel uncomfortable because you can't really say much because at the end, they're all right. So, yeah. So I thank you for this conversation.
You're welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you. Thanks for being so generous in the learning community. So Aurora writes, I understand the silence allows the client and the worker to sit with what is said and make sense of a statement made to help motivation process. However, what if one encounter with someone who does not appreciate silence and demanded that you as the worker weigh in on what was said? How would you proceed with that? Aurora, I love your question. I love it. I don't know if you can unmute. If you can unmute, is there anything else you want to add about that? I love that question. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking about it and and say that I will, pose the question because you will encounter somebody who demanded that you weigh on whatever was said and they require an answer from you. So as the worker, how do you proceed with this?
Yes, and I love the question, Aurora. And the reason I love the question is because one of the things that people, and this is sadly another misconception about motivational interviewing, that there's a script. And that if I just know the right thing to say, then I'll be able to practice MI. Well, to Aurora's excellent question that she's posing to me in the learning community is, well, what if the person says, like, enough of this silence. I need to know what you think about this. Well, that is where the client is giving you a clear message and they want to know what you think or what your reaction is. Or a client may also say to you, Aurora, what do you think I should do? And that is what's called in motivational interviewing establishing the condition of permission, meaning the client has outrightly asked you. So if Aurora was the client and she said to me, Paul, we're talking about this and I want to know what I should do. I would say, okay, well, Aurora, I have some information that I can share with you that people in your situation, these are some of the steps they took. I'm happy to share that information with you. And I would share that information with Aurora. And then I would say to her, given that that's what some people would do, what are your thoughts? What's your reaction to that information? That's an open-ended question, inviting Aurora's response. And then I would say, Aurora, given what we talked about, given the information that you heard, any thoughts about what might be a next step for you? All of that is, am I consistent? Because it is using what's called the ask, tell, ask strategy, which is simply if the client asks you or if you want to make a suggestion. Let's say Gregory had something he wanted to offer to the client. He knows that there's some particular action that might help. Gregory could say to the client, Aurora, I have this information that has helped some people in your situation. Would it be okay if I shared that with you? Aurora is free to exercise her autonomy. She can say, no thanks, or she can say, yeah, okay, go ahead. And if she says yes, she's granted Gregory permission. Gregory can then share the information and then say, what do you think about that? Given that that's worked for some people, what are your thoughts about that? Aurora would respond in the way she responded. And then Gregory could say, well, given what we talked about, you're the one who will ultimately make the decision about what you'll do, affirming her autonomy. And then, so given what we've talked about, what do you think you might do next? Open-ended question. And Aurora might say, nothing. I will do nothing next. Or Aurora might say, yeah, thanks, Gregory, but that's not going to work for me because of this, this, and this. But that's called the ask, tell, ask strategy, or the elicit, provide, elicit strategy, EPE. ASA or EPE. I wish that we had another hour today. We don't, but I wish we had another hour today where we could focus on just that strategy. Because the thing I want to tell you folks, and I know sharing information, maybe offering feedback is part of your work. We could spend a whole hour just talking about that particular strategy. But you have the parameters of what it is now. And that's called the elicit, provide, elicit, EPE, or ask, tell, ask. Jeanette, I can think about possibly putting together a training on that topic that would focus just on that. And it maybe could be like an hour workshop. Okay. So, and thank you. That's something that I'll certainly consider. Karen says, yes, please. Okay. All right. Karen, since you said please, I'll really, really think about it. I was thinking about it before, but thank you for saying please. It's a great suggestion from our colleagues. So Aurora, to your point, it is possible in the work that we do. And by the way, I'm hoping, time permitting, we're going to get to go back to the dentist. And I want to remind Emma's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I want to underline that the dentist got some MI training in the second video. And we are actually going to see possibly how the dentist practices motivational interviewing. I'll let you decide, but we'll get a sense of, you'll see it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again, folks, because there's a couple of things I want to share with you. And I do actually have 2 videos I'd like to show you today, if possible. And if not, we'll share the links with you and you can watch them on your own. I do think, though, that there is benefit in our watching them together and commenting on them together as a learning community. Okay. I'm going to share my screen again, and I have a little bit of a physical activity that I'm going to ask you to engage in. And again, only engage in this to the degree that's comfortable and right for you. But what I'm going to ask you to do in preparation for it is please remove everything from your hands. So have your hands free and available. Yes, Julie, I certainly can. I'll type that in the chat right now. I'll use my fingers at the moment to respond to that. It's EPE or ATA. Oh, ATA. Yep. Elicit, provide, elicit, or ask, tell, ask. And that's an MI consistent strategy to sharing information or feedback. And to Aurora's point, if a client says to you, Gregory, I want to know what I should do about this situation, that is establishing the client has asked Gregory, and Gregory is free to respond. And if Gregory is practicing motivational interviewing, Gregory can respond using EPE. an am I consistent approach to answering that question. Okay. All right. So hopefully everybody has their hands free at this particular moment. If you're driving, keep your hands on the wheel. You'll just do this spiritually with us and emotionally. You will not use your hands, but I'm going to share my screen. And I want to share this image. I showed you it briefly with the big eyeball. And what I want to underline here, and this is related to what we were just talking about the intensity or the meaning behind what people are telling us, is that we are operating on 4 levels simultaneously, hopefully, in terms of our attending when we're in a conversation with somebody. One of them is with our ears. We are hearing what they are saying and what they are not saying. We are hearing how they are saying it. We are hopefully listening with our heart as well. We are also visually focusing on what's happening in the moment. And we are also trusting our gut. So this is where the physical activity comes in. And if you can see that the blue heart here is pulsing and there is another ear behind it, under the blue ear, type a Y in the chat, but that's not the physical activity. But if you can see that the blue heart is pulsing and that there's another ear behind it, to emphasize the listening, and it's wonderful. Out of the 121 of us, already 53 of you have responded. And I'm hoping that you can see this magical effect created by PowerPoint. Excellent. So now I'm going to stop sharing the magical effect. And now the real magic happens. What I'm going to ask everybody to do is point to your eyes. Go ahead and point to your eyes. Point to your ears. Excellent. Touch your heart on the outside, and then touch your belly. Okay. Now, what I'm going to ask is we're going to do it once more together. I'm going to lead, but then I'm going to turn leadership over to Emma, and I'm going to ask her to lead the learning community in the activity. But we're going to do it once more. Eyes, ears, heart on the outside, gut, your belly. Touch your belly. And Emma, take it away. We're going to follow Emma now.
What am I doing? Eyes? Ears? Heart on the outside? Belly on the outside.
Yes, very good. Very good. Excellent. Thank you, Emma. Your very small check will not be put in the mail for that. Sorry. But thank you for being willing to do that. Folks, I do that visually as well as physically because I want to underline how important it is to attend while practicing motivational interviewing. And you could probably say it in other practices too, but I'm focusing on motivational interviewing, how important it is to attend on all 4 of those levels simultaneously. And I want to link it to the story about the woman 40 cigarettes a day to 15. Because had I not been attending or present on all 4 of those levels simultaneously, I may not have been able, yes, definitely awareness, Julie, you're absolutely right. I may not have been able to offer that simple reflection as effectively as I did. Because I felt it in my gut, in my heart. I saw her face, and I also heard the way she said it. MI is about that depth of understanding and attending. Okay? So just wanted to emphasize that. I'm going to share my screen again. And again, Emma, thanks so much for leading us. So there is a dynamic that Miller and Rolnick have identified, and they're probably not the first people to identify, but they are really good at coming up with catchy ways of remembering things that are really helpful. And I personally very strongly relate to this dynamic. And they say that this dynamic is particularly prevalent. It probably is prevalent even when these conditions are not present. But what they say is that this dynamic is particularly prevalent when a person expresses their ambivalence to us. And we know that ambivalence about a particular behavioral change goal is an fill in the blank. Let's see if anybody remembers. OPP, yes! Ka-ching! Excellent. Yes, we know that ambivalence about a particular behavioral change goal is an opportunity. And what Miller and Rolnick suggest is that when somebody takes the risk, is open enough to express their ambivalence about a particular behavioral change goal with us, OPP, that we can automatically have a switch get flipped, which is our fixing reflex. That oftentimes the provider's desire to want to help, to solve, to support flips this switch that is referred to as the fixing reflex. It used to be called the writing reflex, but in the 4th edition of Miller and Rolnick's book, which just came out recently, they've changed it to the fixing reflex. And I want to tell you that motivational interviewing has not resolved or eradicated my fixing reflex. It still comes up. And the acronym that I'm about to share with you helps me to not act it out. And that is to simply, one part of it is simply to acknowledge that when my switch is flipped, I want to fix, solve, rescue, that I can acknowledge that that's what is coming up for me, but I don't have to act it out because I don't want to interrupt this person's change process. And this acronym, RULE, RULE, can be particularly helpful in reminding me and keeping me from actually acting it out. The R stands for resist the fixing reflex. The U, understand your client's motivation or motivations, which reminds me of eyes, ears, heart, and gut. And then L is listen to your client. And again, attending on all 4 of those levels, listening deeply. And then the E is empower your client. And E, empowerment in motivational interviewing, as we know, is about supporting and inviting and helping the person to exercise their autonomy. And their autonomy in a particular moment might be to do nothing. And that's perfectly okay. So RULE, resist the fixing reflex. U, understand the client's motivation. L, listen to your client. And E, empower your client. Now, I'm probably the only one in this learning community who experiences the fixing reflex. I mean, maybe I'm not alone. There might be 1 or 2 of you in here who, at times experience the fixing reflex. But I can honestly tell you, Sarah writes, this is so hard to do. Yes. Oh, okay. So Allie says I'm far from alone. Thank you, Allie. It's you and me and Sarah and Brenda and Joseph and Karen. Okay, so at least the few of us. Okay, Marguerite says we're not alone, but is not identifying that Marguerite feels the fixing reflex. So I just want to normalize it for you folks. It is normal for us to have that reaction when we are experiencing or hearing about somebody else's ambivalence. We don't have to act it out. Okay, so there are a couple of other people who are also acknowledging that. Oh, okay. Lure. Interesting. I have not heard that. I wonder if maybe they changed it in the in the 4th edition. I'm gonna have to look specifically. that maybe they did change it. So it'd be listen, understand, resist the fixing reflex, and empower. Okay. They might have liked that better than rule. Rule sounds too colonial, I think. The point is that we don't want to act it out. We don't have to. I feel like the fixing reflex is greater when working with youth, my opinion. Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. That is your opinion, and that could also be your experience for a variety of reasons. So again, folks, just keeping in mind that whether it's whatever acronym we choose, that the thing we want to keep in mind is that it's normal and we don't have to act it out. Normal doesn't have to be acted out. You know, it's funny, Elizabeth, I agree with you. It continues to help me, the acronym. And what I will tell you is some people told me that who participated in this learning community conversation, that when they actually got a copy of the slides, they printed out a full page version of this particular slide right here. And they hung it up in their office so that it reminded them that when that switch was flipped, they could just like scan, resist the fixing reflex, understand this person's motivation, listen to this person, and empower this person. So that was just something that some people shared with me after the fact, that the slides. Sarah says, I might do that. Okay. All right. Well, if it works for you. Agreed, Sarah, that it could be very helpful for parenting teens classes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm glad I shared that some people had shared that with me. So we have about 45 minutes remaining in this learning community conversation. I'm still hopeful that I'm going to get to show you these two videos. And I do want to make sure that I underline these three essential elements. I have been referring to all of these and naming all of these since day one. And I also wanted you to be able to have slides that would support and remind you of some of what we talked about. MI spirit is the way we are. It's the approach that we want to take when we engage in an MI consistent conversation and the practice of motivational interviewing. MI spirit alone does not constitute the practice of motivational interviewing. The 4 tasks, formerly called the 4 processes in the 3rd edition of the book, they've been renamed to the 4 tasks. The 4 tasks are the work that we're doing when we are practicing motivational interviewing. And there are 4 identified tasks. We've named actually all of them. But again, I'm going to give you a slide that puts them all together and lays out the trajectory. Oars are what I refer to as the rock stars, or the queen, if you think of the band Queen, the queen of motivational interviewing. Everybody seems to know oars: open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And you may remember, folks, that I shared, might have been part 1, that the use of oars in and of themselves, just like MI Spirit, does not constitute the practice of motivational interviewing. They are the core communication skills. Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick did not invent them, but they did come up with a very memorable acronym to help people to hold on to them. So the good news is that if you're asking an open-ended question, you're asking an open-ended question. The more complex understanding of it is that if you're asking an open-ended question and you're practicing motivational interviewing, the use of that open-ended question is going to help explore that person's ambivalence about the change goal and or evoke change talk about that particular change goal. So it's the intentionality of the use of the skills in the practice of motivational interviewing. You know, I was talking to a colleague the other day, Carol, well, I'll save what I mentioned with this colleague. It involves bananas, but I'll come back to it. Carol just put something really interesting in the chat, and Carol, I really appreciate that you put this in the chat. And I'm wondering if I'm going to read what you wrote, and I'd like to invite you, if you're able, to unmute and elaborate if you'd like to. Carol is questioning in the chat. Can we really empower our clients? I believe that empowerment comes from within. We can support and encourage our clients to get. I think it's to a place where they feel empowered to act or make changes, but the power is within them and not in us. I agree with that statement as it's written there. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, Carol, because I do want to make time to invite you to elaborate on that if you're able to unmute and if you would care to. Because I would like to underline something specifically about empowerment and motivational interviewing. So Carol, do you want to unmute and elaborate on that, or is there
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Good,
Go
good.
ahead.
I'm on a different system.
Yeah.
In terms of I struggle with that term because I think when we talk about empowering our clients, it's as if we have the power. It
Yes.
doesn't, and empowerment really, it belongs to them. It doesn't belong to us. And then we then take that responsibility on that we have to do that. But I think what we do, certainly the process, and certainly through moving them through this the MI process, to get them to that point of feeling like they feel empowered enough to make a change. So that's why I always, when I see that and I hear that term, empower our clients or empower others, I think it takes something away from the client and put a lot more power in us. And that puts more stress on us to assist. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes complete sense. And Carol, I'm so glad you put it on the table, because it is a core question that has been circulating and has bubbled back up to the surface in the MINT, Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers community, because MI Spirit, the way you are with people, used to be partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. And in the 4th edition, it was changed to partnership, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And many people in the MINT community have asked the same question that Carol is putting on the table. And Carol, I couldn't agree with you more. And before we go to Will, I'll just add that one of the central foundational elements of the practice of motivational interviewing is that the motivations all come from the client. They don't come from us. That it's about their motivation, and we're guiding them to help them to get in touch with and access the power of their own motivation. So to Carol's point, some people say, oh, I practice motivational. Carol's not saying this, but some people say, oh, I practice motivational interviewing. I motivate my clients. Well, guess what? If you're motivating your clients, you're not practicing motivational interviewing. Because motivational interviewing, as somebody very clearly noted in the chat, is guiding people toward their own motivations. And it's their motivations that will empower them, not ours. And I want to underline, in terms of the example that we talked about, the woman and her daughter was her motivation. Now, some people might say, yeah, but she needs to do it for herself. Well, from an MI perspective, whether it's an extrinsic motivation or whether it's an intrinsic motivation, if it's a motivation that's powerful for her, it's what motivates her. So in MI, we don't care whether it's extrinsic or intrinsic. What we care about is the intensity, to use Layla's word. What we care about is whether there's energy or power connected to that motivation. So I agree with Carol 100% that we can't empower somebody, but what we can do is offer them the power to connect with their own motivations. We can offer them the power to exercise their own autonomy. Just like every time I say to you, is it okay if I ask you another question? You can say no. I am asking you that not to be nice, not to be polite. I'm asking it for two reasons: to respect you and to invite you to exercise your autonomy. So, Carol, thank you so much for putting that in the chat. And MI has a very specific connection to empowerment. Will, you wanted to comment or say something. The floor is yours.
Yeah, the way I look at it, and I think it maybe my definition of empowerment might differ from the woman that just spoke. It might be the same, but I look at empowerment as as support to the person. We give support to the person, the process of support, so that that person, like in many things that we do in motivation, they can discover for themselves their own personal power. And then I think when they do that, then there's efficacy, where they're walking away thinking, I got this, right? I got this. And some of the ways that we support is, when we ask for permission and say, look, I've got some information here, can I share that with you? We can support them with education. We can support them with skills and things like that. And again, through that and through their own motivation, then they can discover for themselves the power that's within. They have that self-confidence, and then they walk away and I go, yeah, I got this.
Excellent. Thank you for adding to that, Will. Thank you. Yeah. So, folks, I'm going to share my screen again, and we're just going to quickly walk through the structural components of these three core pieces of the practice of motivational interviewing. One, MI spirit, the way you are when you're with the person. Two, the four tasks, the work you do when you're practicing motivational interviewing. Ors, the core communication skills, which everybody's really familiar with, pretty much. And for those of you who aren't, I'll walk through them and label them all for you. And I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Yes, asking permission is very important. And Letitia writes, we sometimes get so caught up in the situation that we lose our power to push ourselves to move out of a situation that has weighed us down. Yeah, that's absolutely true for many reasons. And Julie writes, vocabulary, labels, acronyms, etc., is in a constant change according to changing perspectives, learning, discoveries, exploring, experience, etc. in society. Julie, that is so true. And I will also say that that's particularly true to the evidence-based practice of motivational interviewing, because it is probably one of the most, possibly the first or definitely the second most studied evidence-based practice that we have at our disposal to help people in their change process. The first, or possibly the second now, is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. But there is a lot of research. And one of the things that Dr. Miller loves to do, and I find this really charming, every time he gives a keynote speech, he loves to give an update on how many clinical studies have been done on the practice of motivational interviewing. He keeps a very robust tally of how many studies have actually been conducted. And it's in the thousands now. In fact, I think it's over 2,000 now. The actual number escapes me at this point. So let us take a look at MI Spirit. I will repeat. It is how you are because the slide also says it, not because I'm reading the slide. I also want to repeat and acknowledge that MI Spirit in and of itself is not the practice of motivational interviewing. Because remember, an MI consistent approach is appropriate for any and every conversation you have with another person. The practice of MI is not. So, to be very clear, the 4 elements that make up MI Spirit, as it is currently conceived in the 4th edition of Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick's book, Motivational Interviewing, Helping People to Change and Grow, is that we establish a partnership with that person. We are a collaborative partner. We accept that person as they are. We acknowledge that as a human being, they have absolute worth. We do our best to affirm their autonomy and emphasize their autonomy. We affirm their strengths, and we seek to engage in what's called accurate empathy, which is to accurately understand from their perspective what they are communicating to us. In that way of being, we want to be compassionate and empathic, and we want to empower them to use the power of their motivations and to exercise their autonomy. This is a plan, this is a structure that can be used in any and every conversation that you're having with people that you come across in quote unquote the service arena, social service arena, and or the helping professions. This alone is not the practice of motivational interviewing. It is a part of what is necessary in order to practice motivational interviewing, and by itself, it is a banana. It is not banana bread. So if you think of MI Spirit as a banana, and you think of the practice of motivational interviewing as banana bread, this is what my colleague told me the other day, and the image just really works for me. And I think partly it's because I like banana bread. My mother used to make it, and she really made it really well. I loved it. MI Spirit is the banana. You can't call a banana banana bread. Banana bread includes bananas as part of the ingredients. That is the practice of motivational interviewing. The 4 tasks. This is what we do when we are practicing motivational interviewing. First and foremost, which is the platform that we establish and we continue, is engagement. And I would go so far as to say that is our intentional employment of an MI consistent approach. That is the platform. That is something we carry with us through all of the work that we do when we're practicing motivational interviewing. Once that is established and is growing, and again, it's possible to do that and not have had a lot of time elapse. So the thing I want you to be very careful about is don't get caught up in the idea of, oh, I'd practice motivational interviewing if I just had enough time. I often like to say to people, because I've listened to very effective audio recordings, if you have 3 minutes, you can practice motivational interviewing. Again, if there's an identified behavioral change goal that the person feels ambivalent about. If you have 3 minutes, you can engage in an MI consistent approach, and hopefully that will lead to having more than 3 minutes somewhere down the road. So engagement, and then what happens is what's called focusing. Focusing is where the identified behavioral change goal is named and agreed upon. And then once that change goal is there, and remember, it's a change goal that the person feels ambivalent about, because ambivalence about a particular behavioral change goal is an and there's a word that goes there, to practice motivational interviewing. And I want to thank the 3 people who have responded so far. Excellent, more than 3 people. Yes, it is the opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. If the person has an identified behavioral change goal that they are not ambivalent about, that they are ready to take action, plan, go right to planning. Generally speaking, there's ambivalence about a behavioral change goal, and that is where MI is effective. And once that change goal is identified, everything we do is about evoking that person's ambivalence about the behavioral change goal and evoking the change talk and employing the change talk. And remember, and I think I said this in day 1, and I think it was because I think it might have been Mark who brought this up or who helped me to offer this to the learning community. And I could be remembering wrong, but I do think it was Mark. I could be remembering wrong though. That we engage the person, there's an identified behavioral change goal that they feel ambivalent about. We have the opportunity, ka-ching, to practice motivational interviewing. We are evoking their change talk and inviting them to explore their ambivalence. And when the person moves from preparatory change talk, they've talked about their desire to make the change, their ability to make the change, their reasons to make the change, or their need to make the change. Darn. After they've done that, they can then move into what's called mobilizing change talk, which is where they start to say, I am going to do this, where they offer commitment language. They offer what's called activation, which is they start to tell you what they're going to do to achieve it. Or they tell you the steps they're going to take and they take them. That's called taking steps. And that's how we know that someone has enough motivation to actually move to planning and then move to action to achieve the goal. So this is a very helpful structure. And again, it's not perfectly linear. People sometimes we're evoking, they're not ready to plan. And we get a sense from that from the conversation. And we can continue to evoke change talk and employ change talk and invite them to talk about their desire, ability, reasons, or need, which stands for DARN. That's the acronym. And that's preparatory change talk. And then CATS is mobilizing change talk, which is commitment, activation, and taking steps. Those are 2 types of change talk. And they indicate different tasks that we want to be focusing on. And then the last piece, which is the piece that everyone is really super familiar with, are the core communication skills. Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And let me say a couple of things about this. Open-ended questions are questions that cannot be answered by yes or no. I'm going to ask you a question. If you think it's opened, type an O in the chat. There are 120 people in the learning community. Let's hear from all 120 of you. And then I haven't asked the question yet. Let me ask the question first, and then you can weigh in. I love it. So the question is, no problem, no problem. Did you have a good day? If it's open, type an O. If it's closed, type a C. Did you have a good day? And let's hear from all 120 of you. Yes, people have got it. It's a closed question. Fantastic. That is a closed question. Keep in mind, folks, in terms of the practice of motivational interviewing, closed questions are not bad. We want to use any tools that we have available to us with intention. Yes. Now, I think I saw one open there. No, did you have a good day is actually a closed question. It can be answered by yes or no. I'm going to ask another question, and I'm going to ask you if it's open or closed. And again, type an O for open. Don't type it yet because I haven't asked the question yet. And C for closed. No problem, Sharon. No problem. I sometimes type the wrong thing too, or not what I intended. So how was your day? How was your day? Is that open or closed? Yes, it's open. How was your day is open because I can describe, and I'm glad somebody answered. It was excellent. Yeah, and Spencer typed, what does your day look like? Yes, that would be open as well. Thank you, Spencer. Thanks for adding another question. So that's an open-ended question. Affirmations are statements of strengths or efforts that the person has made, and they are generally in relationship to the behavioral change goal. That's affirmation. Okay. I will say that in the 4th edition, there's been movement to identify simple affirmations and complex affirmations. Now, again, what I'll simply say is simple affirmations are more on the surface. Complex affirmations are more about intrinsic strengths that a person may have that can be leveraged toward the change that they are considering. If we had an additional hour, we could spend time talking about the difference between simple affirmations and complex affirmations. Sadly, we don't have that hour. And the one thing I really want to emphasize here is that affirmations generally, when they're effective, begin with the word you. You continue to show up in court, and you're going to make sure that you get the outcome that you want. That would be an affirmation of someone's effort. That's very different than, I'm proud of you for showing up to court. That's very different. Affirmations, effective ones, usually begin with the word you. And I'm going to ask you to, everybody to type the word you into the chat. Y-O-U. Yes. And then reflections. Reflections are probably one of the tools that requires the most practice in order to become proficient. There are a number of different types of reflections. There are simple reflections. There are complex reflections. There are double-sided reflections. There are amplified reflections. There are a number of kinds of reflections. And again, I don't want you to get caught up in the differences of them, but reflections, this is the important piece. Reflections end in a period. They are not a question. And I'm going to ask everybody to please type a period in the chat. And there are 119 people in this learning community. Let's see if we can get 119 periods in the chat, because folks, reflections are statements. They're not questions. There is a very interesting kind of reflection called a spoiled reflection. And I'm going to give you an example of a spoiled reflection because it really tickles me when I hear them in audio recordings. It's generally someone who is not trusting the strength of their reflection. They'll say, you really want to make your marriage work, right? They tack on a right with a big question mark at the end. They're looking for confirmation. That's called the spoiled reflection. The reflection would have simply been, you really want to make your marriage work. End with a period. And I want to thank the 88 of you. I don't know what the others of you are doing, but I want to thank the 88 of you, 88 plus now, who typed a period in the chat. And then summaries, folks. When talking about motivational interviewing, we know what a summary is. I went to social work school and I was trained how to do summaries. And when I was trained to do summaries in social work school, I was trained to summarize everything. In MI, summaries are selective and they are intentional, and they usually are made up of, in the practice of MI, they are made up of change talk. And Miller and Rolnick call that a bouquet, where you put a number of things, a number of the elements of the change talk together in a bouquet, and you hand that summarized bouquet back to, like a bouquet of flowers. Or some people say bouquet, whichever your pronunciation is, whichever you like. But a summary is a collection of things, usually change talk, more than one. And a reflection is usually one thing. Okay? So just keeping that in mind. Those are the core skills. Those are the things that everybody is fairly familiar with. And I will also reiterate, repeat, say again, that use of these core tools does not constitute the practice of motivational interviewing. It's how they are used within the conversation. Are they being used in relationship to exploring ambivalence and building motivation, strengthening motivation for a particular identified behavioral change goal? That these are also a banana, or maybe they're the flour, if you're using flour in your banana bread. They alone do not equal a banana bread. So just keeping that in mind. So keeping in mind also, folks, that MI is guiding. It is directional. It is not directive. We do not tell people what to do. Sarah writes, using the mom who wants to cut down to 15 cigarettes a day, can you give an example of a summary? Boquete still has me laughing. I'm glad, Alec. So Sarah, to your question, I will do that in sort of a limited way. The summary might be something like this. And I'm thinking of Hillary as I say this, although I can't see her right now, but I'm pretending I'm looking at you, Hillary. The change that you're considering is cutting down from 40 cigarettes, 2 packs of cigarettes a day, to 15 cigarettes a day. You've talked about a number of reasons why you are considering this change, and it's really upsetting to you that your daughter is expressing her fear that you could die early. So that's really only reiterating the goal, alluding to a number of reasons. I could be more specific and add other reasons, but I'd have to go back and listen to the recording again. And the one I put at the end was the most powerful one, that her daughter doesn't want her to die. So that would be the bequeath or bouquet that we would hand back to her. Hopefully that was helpful. Oh, great. You're very welcome, Sarah. I'm glad. That was a quick example. So the North Star, and if you happen to know, by the way, the astronomical name of the North Star, feel free to type it in the chat. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm an amateur astronomer. So the idea of MI having a North Star is very appealing to me. And let's see if anybody knows. No, Sirius is the dog star. It's Polaris. Yes, Whitney. And Whitney and Jessica and Karis, any of you know, if you know, or anybody else, if you know, Melissa, if you know what constellation is Polaris in, if you know what constellation it's in, type that in the chat. It's actually Ursa Minor. It's not Ursa Major. It's in the Little Bear. Yes, the Small Dipper, the Little Dipper. And for extra credit, if you know what magnitude the North Star is, most people think the North Star is bright. It is actually not very bright. It's actually kind of weak, but it's always in the same position. If you know what magnitude it is, I don't know if it's a red giant or not. But I think I do know the magnitude number. So if you know what magnitude it is, type that in the chat. The North Star, the thing that's always guiding your practice of motivational interviewing, is the behavioral change goal. And it can be really helpful to, I love it, 1.98. I think you were very close, Michelle. It is either that, the A in darn is ability. Julie, desirability, reasons, and need. I think it's actually 2, but you might be even more accurate, Michelle, that it's 1.98. because maybe you looked it up, or maybe you just know, maybe you're an astronomer. I'm only an amateur. So it's important to acknowledge, folks, that the behavioral change goal is the North Star because it will guide everything that you do in the MI conversation. So I think we have time. I'm going to take the time and I'll have you watch the second video on your own. But I think we have time. I want you to see the dentist using the practice of motivational interviewing. So let me get, oh, hold on a second. We've talked about change talk. I'm going to take my screen down and I'm going to get that video because I want us to watch that together as possibly a way of concluding our conversation and hopefully leaving a little time for you to be able to complete the evaluation. Keeping my fingers crossed that you will find it useful. I will also invite you after this learning community conversation to watch this video again. But we'll watch it once together and then we'll have a brief moment to talk about it.
Okay, hard part's over. So the good news is no cavities.
Oh, hooray.
Yes, always happy to hear that. I do have some concerns though, because I'm seeing some irritation in your mouth and the palate that's called nicotinic stomatitis.
Oh, that sounds bad.
Yeah, it is. It's some damage to the roof of your mouth that happens from tobacco smoking. And so I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about how tobacco fits in your life right now.
Tobacco? I mean, I don't smoke cigarettes. I've never smoked cigarettes. I do go out with my friends. We go out to bars and, we'll have a few drinks and smoke some of those little cigarillo type things. I mean, I don't even think of them as cigars, and they're certainly not cigarettes. And I mean, I'll have one or two of those in an evening with my friends, but certainly not 20 or 30 of them a day like you would with cigarettes. And that's the only thing that could possibly have anything to do with tobacco.
So you've made a decision in your life not to smoke cigarettes. It's something you didn't want to do. It sounds like you're kind of concerned about the health effects of cigarettes. But you have been smoking the little cigarillos, at least one or two every time you go out.
Right, but that's just like a social thing. That's something that my friends and I do. We it's not a habit or something that I have to have. And, talking about one or two when we go out for an evening, not packs of them.
Yeah, so you're not like those chain smokers. You're not smoking packs and packs a day.
No.
The amount you smoke is so minuscule you can't even imagine that it would cause any harm. And yet here it is damaging the roof of your mouth.
Well, you have a point there. Now that you mention it, I have started having one or two at work, when we have breaks, because I have a couple of friends at work that smoke. And so every time we have a break, we all go out to the break place outside. And so I go with them and I have one of these Swisher Sweets. I like the peach flavor the best. They're so cute. But that's really only pretty recently.
So smoking has kind of become a big part of your social life now. When you go out, you're smoking, and even during breaks at work, you're smoking.
Well, yeah. Now that you say it like that, it's true. I am smoking on a daily basis.
So aside from that social aspect, what are the things you like about it?
Well, it's relaxing, and it's just nice to be with people. And when I like to go to Las Vegas, and so when we go to Vegas, it's really fun to go to the cigar bars. It's kind of sophisticated and fun, and so it's mostly a social thing.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I was a chain smoker.
Okay, how about the other side? Have you noticed any not so good things about the smoking?
Well, I was going to ask you about whitening my teeth, because I've noticed that they have more stains on them than a few years ago. And so I imagine that has something to do with the smoking.
Yeah, so we're noticing some pretty negative effects in terms of your oral health with the smoking. Are there any other things that you're concerned about?
Well, there's the expense, what with the economy and all, I had to be careful about my money. And so there is the extra expense of because I'm buying more of them than I used to. So the money aspect is also a concern.
Mm-hmm. So there's your oral health, there's the financial aspect. And then earlier you brought up some concerns about smoking cigarettes and how that can be harmful for you.
Oh, yeah.
Were you aware of the fact that smoking these little cigarillos, the Swisher Sweets, can have some of the same negative health effects?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I thought of it more as a fun thing to do with my friends, certainly not a smoking habit or anything that would be harmful.
Mm-hmm. So it's
I purposefully stopped it there because I want to create a cliffhanger. And I want to create a cliffhanger for two reasons. Because I want you to see the progression from there into how the conversation goes forward and then comes to a conclusion for that conversation. The video is called The Effective Dentist. It's on YouTube. And what I'm going to ask everybody to do at this particular point is I'm going to ask you to think about, and Kay Carney just anticipated my, as did Nicole, you're anticipating what I'm going to ask you to do. If there's one thing you would point out about the 5 minutes that you've seen, and remember, she's laid the foundation. There's an identified behavioral change goal. She's evoking change talk. But if there's one thing that stands out to you, yeah, the facial expression was a little intense where I stopped it, wasn't it? It was like, but that's because I stopped it. So yeah. So if there's one thing you'd point out that was different this time, what stands out to you most? And just type it in the chat. Less judgmental and pushy, tone and their way of conversation, her silence right away. Beautiful. I'm so glad somebody noticed that. She was patient. She was silent. She was kinder. Yes. She related to the patient better. She was less judgmental. She listened more. The silence. And I'm so glad you're noticing the silence because sometimes people miss that. They miss that the dentist asks an open-ended question and then she shuts up and lets the woman answer it and lets the pause happen so the woman continues. Okay? I'll just say two more things about this video, and then I'm sad to say I think we're at the end. I want to make sure you have time to complete the evaluation. One, yes, this video is not perfect, but it's a great example, a very concise example of an MI consistent approach and the practice of motivational interviewing. So I really want to invite you all to consider seeing the full. I think there's like 4 more minutes. So I really want to invite you to please look at the 4 remaining minutes on your own. So I respect your autonomy as to whether you will choose to do that or not. So having said that, I'm going to share my screen one more time. Talked about change talk. We know it's anything that the person says in favor of the change. It is the key to the success of motivational interviewing. You can really think of it as the goal associated with it. We have a handout that I'm going to send to you that's a conversation about a person named Conrad. And you can read and use this handout in any way that supports your practice. You're also free to share it with your colleagues if you want. And you will be able to look at it the same way you're looking at this video. The only other thing I want you to consider, and this was referred to earlier, is that sometimes there can be an over-reliance on questions because we've been trained to ask questions and we think questions are the way to get information. The thing I'd like you to consider in MI, the practice of MI, that we want to try and do 2 reflections for every question. So again, reflections can be a wonderful way to understand and to communicate to the person that we are trying to understand them. So just keeping that little guidance in mind, if you can, try and do 2 reflections just today. And again, hopefully this will be one piece in your journey in the practice of motivational interviewing. But just for today, in addition to maybe watching that video, if you choose to do that, is also try and do 2 reflections ending in a period. Don't spoil them by tacking a right on the end. 2 reflections before you ask your next question. And then autonomy, by asking permission, we can respect someone's autonomy and it can continue the conversation. If you're hearing somebody offering sustained talk, like the dentist video, well, I only do it, or if the relationship starts to disengage as opposed to be engaged, you can gently ask yourself, is there something that I'm doing or saying that's possibly evoking this sustained talk or this discord? And can I course correct? Can I do something differently so that I can re-engage the person? Having said that, folks, I cannot thank you enough for this rich 6-hour over a couple of weeks journey. Thank you for everything you brought to the learning community. And I hope that we'll get the opportunity to be in some learning communities going forward. Thank you so much, everybody. And have a wonderful week. Happy Monday.